The old house on the edge of Ashvale had always been forgotten, swallowed by time, ivy, and fog. For decades, it stood in rotting silence like a corpse waiting for breath. But silence isn't the same as peace. Sometimes, silence listens. And sometimes, silence stares back. When Thomas Merrin moved into the house, he had no intention of staying long. A freelance horror writer, he bought the place cheap, thinking isolation might stir something in his imagination. The house, built in 1902, stood 3 stories high with crooked walls and cold, gray windows that seemed too dark to reflect anything. It smelled of damp stone, mold, and something else, something iron-sweet and old. Thomas was no stranger to the macabre, but there was something off about this house from the moment he stepped inside. It wasn't the peeling wallpaper or the claw marks gouged into the wooden floor upstairs. It was the feeling that he was never, ever alone, even when he was. It began the first night. He had just finished unpacking a few boxes in the study, setting up his laptop, notepad, and ashtray near the dusty bay window. The light outside had dimmed into the thick charcoal dusk that seemed to bleed from the trees themselves. He lit a cigarette with shaking fingers, not from fear, but from habit. Or so he told himself. He took a puff and stared at the far corner of the room, just beyond the reach of his desk lamp. The darkness there felt thicker than elsewhere, like a bruise on the air. And then something moved. Just a twitch. A subtle flicker. Thomas froze. A shimmer in the black. A suggestion of something long and thin, twitching. Watching. He leaned forward, squinting. Nothing. The cigarette hissed in his fingers. He looked away to exhale the smoke, and when he turned back, something was closer. Still in shadow. Still undefined. But undeniably there. His breath caught in his throat. He didn't blink. Not for 30 long seconds. And during those seconds, the darkness shifted again. He dropped the cigarette, the cherry glowing like a dying eye on the wooden floor. He lunged for the lamp, twisting it toward the corner. It was gone. Only the chair stood there now. Empty. Dusty. Still. Thomas laughed nervously and rubbed his face. "You're tired," he muttered. "You haven't slept. You're seeing things." But as he turned off the desk lamp and stood to leave, something whispered in the dark behind him. "Never blink." He froze. Silence. The kind that screams. Then something scraped against the wooden floorboards behind him. Slow. Dragging. He ran to the hallway and flicked on the overhead light. It flickered, buzzed, and then died. In the pale glow of his phone screen, he fled up the stairs, heart punching his ribs. He didn't sleep that night. The second day was worse. Thomas tried to convince himself he had dreamed the whisper, imagined the presence. But the lingering tension in the air made that lie feel paper-thin. He set up motion detectors. And small cameras around the house, paranoid, he told himself, but practical. He spent the afternoon writing at his desk. The corner remained quiet. Normal. Until dusk. At exactly 6:07 p.m., the room temperature dropped. The hairs on his arms lifted. And the camera light in the corner blinked red. Motion detected. He turned to look. Nothing. But the chill intensified. His eyes burned. And then, the whisper again, so soft it seemed to come from inside his skull. "If you blink, it moves." Thomas's spine stiffened. No. No, no, no. He stepped toward the corner, eyes wide, unblinking. His vision blurred from the strain, but still he stared. The shadows were darker now. Deeper. He felt the room watching him. 30 seconds passed. Then a twitch. Right at the edge of vision. Like a spider's limb flexing. He flinched. He blinked. And when his eyes opened, it was closer. The thing was no longer hidden. Standing tall and impossibly thin, the figure loomed by the edge of the bookshelf. It had no face, only a stretched mass of pale flesh where features should be, its skin shimmering like wet leather. Arms too long. Fingers like bones dipped in ink. It didn't breathe. It stared. Without eyes. Without moving. Thomas wanted to scream, but the fear choked him silent. He didn't blink. His vision blurred again. Eyes strained. The creature tilted its head. And grinned. No mouth. No teeth. But he felt the grin crawl inside his skull like centipedes. And the whisper again. Never. Blink. Thomas locked himself in the bathroom for hours, lights on, mirror covered. He wept, shaking, heart racing like it wanted to escape his ribs. The cameras captured nothing. But he knew it was real. It wasn't sleep paralysis. It wasn't madness. It moved when he blinked. By the third night, he set up a system, blinking one eye at a time, rotating ice packs to keep his eyes from swelling shut. Red Bull and cold showers. He scribbled in his journal. It lives in the dark. I don't know what it is, but it feeds on sight. You blink, it moves. It waits. Watches. And it's getting closer each time. He recorded a video, trying to speak to future viewers. My name is Thomas Merrin. If you're watching this, don't come here. Don't try to see it. If you ever see it, never blink. He stared into the lens. His eyes twitched. Watered. Burned. Then the camera caught something behind him. A tall, gaunt silhouette, motionless. But in the next frame, closer. Then gone. Thomas's world spiraled. Sleep-deprived, eyes bloodshot, every shadow became a threat. He stopped showering. Ate with one eye open. He nailed every window shut and lined the walls with mirrors, except they showed nothing. No reflection. No figure. Until one night, one mirror cracked. A thin, spider-like fracture from top to bottom. From inside the glass. He called a friend. Karen. She was a doctor. Rational. Calm. Come over, he begged. Please. I'm losing it. When she arrived, Thomas was sitting in the middle of the living room, surrounded by open lamps, with every corner of the room lit. His eyes were red-rimmed. Bloodshot. Barely human. You look like hell, she whispered. He said nothing. Just pointed to the mirror. She looked. Nothing there. Thomas. You didn't see it. There's nothing there. Because you blinked. Karen stared at him. You need sleep. I can't. It's in the house, he whispered. It's in the corner. It's watching. It never leaves. And it's closer than ever. Karen shook her head. You've had a psychotic break. You need help. Don't blink. Thomas. Then the lamp beside her flickered. Her expression changed. Thomas didn't move. He only said, voice barely a breath. Don't turn around. Karen froze. Whatever you do, don't turn around. Don't blink. Don't even close your eyes. Her breathing became shallow. Her pupils widened. Behind her, movement. Small. Subtle. The creak of the floor. Thomas's eyes welled with tears. It's behind you now. Karen laughed nervously. You're scaring me, Tom. She blinked. And her body convulsed. Something snatched her. In the span of a blink. One blink. Gone. No sound. No scream. Just, gone. Only her glasses remained, lying in a smear of red across the wooden floor. Thomas collapsed. Sobbing. Eyes wide open. The house was silent again. But now the figure stood where Karen had been. Still. Watching. Closer than ever. Thomas tried to look away. But the whisper returned, louder this time, right behind his ear. You're learning. Good. But you're still weak. You blinked. And with every blink from now on, it would come closer. Until it reached his face. Until it reached his eyes. Sleep had become a luxury Thomas could no longer afford. It was 4:12 a.m. He sat in the kitchen, eyes bloodshot and unblinking, lit only by the buzz of a flickering fluorescent bulb. The house felt like a living organism now, walls pulsing faintly, breathing behind the drywall. Shadows seemed to bleed from the ceiling corners like slow ink spills. Thomas hadn't blinked in over 2 hours. Every time he did, it came closer. Every blink shortened the distance between it and him, as though it slipped forward between seconds, lurking in the gaps between perception. But now, it didn't retreat to corners. It didn't wait. It watched him openly. It stood in plain sight. And it never moved, unless he blinked. That was the rule. Its limbs hung like dislocated joints, thin and wet, as if it had once belonged to the ocean. Its faceless head tilted slowly as though fascinated by his decaying will. You blink again, Thomas whispered to himself, you're done. His eyes screamed for rest. Muscles in his face twitched. Eyelids trembled, like traitors on the verge of surrender. He stood and slammed his hand down on the countertop, letting the pain anchor him. Across the kitchen, the figure twitched. One movement. One. He hadn't blinked. But it moved anyway. That wasn't the rule. No, he muttered. You don't move unless I blink. You don't. It tilted its head again. Something inside his skull itched, like static flooding his thoughts. He clutched his temples and screamed. The lights above him popped, plunging the room into half-darkness. Then the voice came again, but not in his ears. Not from the room. From inside his head. Sleep is betrayal. Sleep is death. The eye must stay open. He slammed his head back against the fridge, teeth clenched. He knew what it wanted. It didn't need to say it. It wanted his eyes. Not just to feed. To wear them. 6 days earlier. He remembered now, how it all began. He had found a book. It wasn't really a book. More like a small, leather-bound journal, buried under the floorboards of the third-story attic. The cover had no title. Only an eye, carved into the leather, nailed shut with what looked like rusted wire. The pages were filled with sketches, horrific, trembling outlines of faces with eyes scratched out, bodies warped by terror, always watching something unseen. Words written in frantic loops filled the margins. Don't sleep. Never blink. The eye that watches does not forgive. The eye is hungry. Thomas had laughed back then. Thought it was a prank. A relic of some poor, delusional previous tenant. He placed the journal on the shelf and forgot it. Until he started hearing footsteps when no one was home. Until the lights began to die one by one. Until the mirror in the hallway began showing shapes that weren't in the room. Back in the present, Thomas was spiraling. He had resorted to taping his eyelids open. But even that wasn't enough. Microblinks, those half-second spasms when exhaustion overpowered muscle, were happening without his permission. Each time it moved a little closer. By now, it had entered the hallway. By now, it had learned how to cheat the rules. The next morning, or what passed for morning in the eternal gray of Ashevale, Thomas decided to test something. He placed a blinking mannequin in the living room. An old CPR dummy, fitted with servo motors programmed to close its eyes every 6 seconds. He wanted to know if it would chase any blink, or just his. The results were immediate. The thing appeared behind the mannequin within 3 blinks. On the 4th blink, its hand passed through the mannequin's chest. And then it turned its eyeless head toward the camera. It knew. It knew Thomas was watching. And it smiled. Not on its face. Inside Thomas's head. Only yours. Only your eyes. Only your soul. Desperate, Thomas attempted to flee. He packed a single bag, filled it with caffeine pills, water, and duct tape for his eyelids. He ran to the front door. But the lock wouldn't turn. He tried smashing a window, only to see his own reflection shatter while the glass remained whole. He tried his phone, no signal. The house wasn't just haunted. It was sealed. Like a mausoleum made for one. He ran back to the attic. Tore through the floorboards. Dug out the journal again. And there, on the final page, scrawled in something brown and flaking, was a single phrase. It watches you while you sleep. Nightfall came like a curtain. The darkness felt alive. It wasn't the absence of light, it was the presence of something older than light. Thomas locked himself in the upstairs bathroom. Every surface covered in aluminum foil. Candles placed in a circle. He sat in the bathtub, holding a knife in one hand and caffeine pills in the other. His eyes throbbed. His pupils stung. He recited the mantra over and over. Never blink. Never blink. Never blink. But then. A knock. On the door. 3 knocks. Slow. Heavy. He stood, hands shaking. Who's there? He croaked. No answer. Only another knock. This one softer. Closer. From the mirror. He turned slowly. And in the mirror, behind his reflection, stood him. But not him. A version of Thomas, mouth stitched shut, eyes wide and screaming, blood pouring from their corners. The reflection blinked. Once. And the real Thomas felt a pain explode behind his eyes. He fell to the floor, screaming, convulsing. Candles snuffed out. And then, he woke up. Lying in the bathtub. Sunlight streamed through the window. Everything was still. Normal. The pain was gone. Had he fallen asleep? His phone buzzed. One new video file received. From unknown. He opened it. The footage began in the living room, recorded from one of his own cameras. It showed him, walking in a trance. Eyes open. Sleepwalking. Or, not. The Thomas in the video sat on the couch. Smiled. And whispered. You blinked. The video cut to static. Then. Just before the screen turned black. One frame. A single frame. The thing, inside the room. Inches from the screen. Its face stretched wide in mockery. Its fingers outstretched. Reaching. The door behind Thomas creaked. He turned slowly. The hallway was empty. But the light had changed. Everything looked slightly darker. More red. The shadows pulsed. His eyes started twitching uncontrollably. He reached for the duct tape, his last defense. But his fingers wouldn't obey. His hands had gone numb. And then came the voice again, soft as silk, cold as graves. Sleep is a lie, Thomas. You already did. And now I'm free. Thomas stumbled backward. The house groaned. The walls shifted. And from every shadow, eyes opened. Dozens. Hundreds. Watching. Unblinking. The figure stepped forward from the dark, fully visible now. Its arms reached toward Thomas's face, and as he screamed, his eyes finally closed. Thomas awoke in absolute stillness. No sound. No wind. No pulse. Even his own breathing sounded distant, as though underwater. He was lying on the floor of the upstairs hallway, eyelids taped open once more. His body ached. His mouth was dry. He tried to move, but his limbs felt sluggish. Like something was pulling against him with invisible threads. He sat up, the house groaning beneath him. The wallpaper had changed. It wasn't peeling anymore. Instead, it was writhing. Patterns of black and red, twisting, pulsing, watching. Yes. Watching. He could feel their gaze. He forced himself to his feet and stumbled toward the mirror at the end of the hall. As he approached, the reflection grew darker, wrong. The hallway behind his reflection was empty, yet in real time, he could feel something just inches behind him. Something cold. Something breathing. But when he turned, nothing. The house hummed softly. Like it was alive. And the silence crawled into his head again. It started that morning. Thomas had managed to stay awake for 3 straight days using a cocktail of amphetamines, caffeine, and self-inflicted pain. He was beyond exhausted, his thoughts fractured, reality warping around him. The line between the waking world and the eye's domain had thinned. His journal entries had grown incoherent. Scratchings. Doodles of the Faceless One. Warnings scrawled backward, as if his own subconscious was no longer under his control. The more you fear it, the more it sees. It doesn't just live in the dark, it is the dark. Your eyes are its doorways. But the worst was the silence. The crawling silence. It began as a low, vibrating hum in the walls. Then it crept into the floorboards. Into his ears. Into his mind. It sounded like whispers. Not words. Not language. Just movement. Like millions of centipedes skittering behind the drywall. Around noon, the power went out. The house sighed as though relieved to be free of artificial light. Thomas scrambled to relight every candle. The moment the final wick caught flame, the scratching began. Inside the walls. Below the floor. Then. A voice. Not in his head this time. Out loud. A child's voice. From the attic. Soft. Singing. A lullaby. Blink, and I will come to play. In your soul I'll always stay. Close your eyes, and I'll be near. Open wide, I disappear. Thomas froze. He hadn't heard a child in this house before. Ever. He stared up at the ceiling hatch to the attic, the song continuing, out of sync, like 2 children singing together just milliseconds apart. One voice soft and sweet. The other broken and cracked. And then a third voice joined in. Deeper. Hungrier. It didn't sing. It rumbled. And the floor beneath him vibrated with it. Driven by fear and curiosity, Thomas grabbed his flashlight and climbed into the attic, every muscle in his face tense to keep his eyes from closing. The attic was colder than death. Dust danced in the beam of his flashlight. Cobwebs draped across rotting beams like shredded skin. But something had changed. There were drawings on the walls now. Hundreds of them. Childish sketches in charcoal and blood. Figures with no eyes. People curled into balls. Faces screaming in silence. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All surrounding a central image. A great black eye, dripping with tar, suspended over a screaming man whose eyes had been peeled open with hooks. Thomas stumbled back. Then he saw it. In the far corner. A child-sized figure, back turned, head bowed. Pale skin. Long black hair. Wearing a nightgown soaked in rot. She was singing. Very softly. Blink and I will come to play. He approached, slowly, flashlight shaking. Hello. She didn't respond. He got closer. The air grew thick, like breathing through oil. He touched her shoulder. She turned around. Her face was gone. No eyes. No mouth. Just a stretched sheet of skin over bone, as though her face had been erased by God's hand. And yet. She smiled. Without lips. Without expression. He screamed and fell backward, flashlight clattering. And when he looked up. She was gone. But something else was there. The Faceless One. Its elongated body stretched from floor to ceiling, bent like a spider around the rafters, fingers digging into the wood, leaking thick, black tar. Its eye, one single vertical slit, opened across its torso. And it blinked. Not fast. Slowly. Mocking him. Thomas bolted from the attic, eyes watering, heartbeat blurring his thoughts. The silence was everywhere now. Even the air didn't dare make a sound. The only thing that followed him was the faint dripping of that oily black tar, echoing in rhythm with each of his racing heartbeats. He barricaded himself in the study. The candles flickered unnaturally, not from wind, but from breath. There was breathing in the room, but not his. Something rasped behind the walls. And when he turned to the bookshelves, they began to bleed. Thick, inky sludge poured from between the books like tears from blind eyes. Then. The laughter began. Children's laughter. But warped. Twisted. Like children who didn't know how to laugh anymore. Like children who had forgotten their faces. Then, the silence snapped back. And something heavy crawled down the hallway. It didn't walk. It didn't glide. It dragged itself. Nails screeching across the wood. And then. A knock on the study door. Not hard. A slow, tapping knock. 1. 2. 3. Then silence. Thomas grabbed the mirror from the desk, tilted it toward the door, and screamed. It was standing just outside. Its face was mere inches from the wood. No mouth. No nose. Only skin, stretched tight like wax over a skull. But behind that blank face, its eye glowed. Through the skin. Burning red. Watching him. It whispered. I can smell your fear. Your eyes are mine. You blinked in your sleep, Thomas. And now I'm inside. He turned the mirror quickly. But the figure was gone. Only a smear of blood remained under the door, like it had melted into the floor. Thomas backed into the corner, shaking. And then, he felt it. Behind him. Not touching. Just hovering. Breathing down his neck. He turned slowly, eyes wide. There was nothing. But on the wall behind him, new words had appeared, scratched in with nails. It doesn't need to be seen to see you. He collapsed into the chair, his body finally failing him. His vision dimmed. Muscles spasmed. Blood ran from his nose. His eyelids drooped. And he snapped awake. Had he fallen asleep? Just a second. He looked around. Everything was changed. The room had rotted. The walls were covered in peeling skin. The desk was melting into the floor. The candles were replaced with burning eyes, hovering in midair. And in the center of the room stood the Faceless One, arms outstretched. It had grown. It was taller now. Thicker. Stronger. Its eye blazed. Its voice, now deafening, filled the room. You slept. You blinked. You let me in. Now you will see everything. Thomas screamed and fell back, scratching at his own eyes. But he couldn't blink now. His eyelids refused to close. They were gone. As if carved away while he slept. And the world around him shifted. No longer a house. But a vast black void, with thousands of others like him. Standing. Watching. Their eyes removed. But still, forced to stare. To witness. A chorus of endless whispers crawled over the silence. Don't blink. Don't blink. Don't blink. Thomas stood in a world without walls. An eternal, rotting dark. There was no sky. No floor. Just a floating abyss stitched together by twitching shadows and the soft weeping of the eyeless damned. They were everywhere. Hundreds, no, thousands. Lurking in the periphery, skin stretched thin over bone, hollow sockets where eyes had once been, now black, seeping wounds. Each face frozen in the final moments of horror. Mouths opened in mute screams. Hands raised to shield themselves from something they couldn't unsee. Thomas staggered through the darkness, every movement a scream of pain. His legs were failing. His skin burned from the inside. His heart thudded like it was trying to escape the prison of his ribs. But worst of all, his eyes were gone. Not gouged. Not destroyed. Taken. He could still see, somehow. But what he saw now wasn't the world as it was the world through its eyes. Through the Faceless One. Reality was twisted. Rooms inverted. Walls breathing. Floors screaming with mouths that opened and shut like gaping wounds. The air pulsed with a rhythm, a heartbeat that wasn't his. And in this twisted world, time meant nothing. The whispering started again. You looked too long. You blinked in your soul. Now you are part of the eye. Thomas stumbled forward, unsure if he was walking on floor, air, or flesh. Everything beneath him felt soft, like walking on skin. Moist. Quivering. He came upon a circle of people, faces familiar, but grotesquely altered. Karen was among them. Her face torn open from ear to ear, a cavernous void where her eyes had once glowed with life. She smiled, split-lipped and broken. Thomas, she whispered, her voice like wet leaves crumbling, I blinked too. He backed away, choking on bile. Another stepped forward, a man he didn't recognize, but whose voice boomed in his ears like thunder. I was a priest, the man croaked, face bandaged, blindfold stained with blood. I thought I could cast it out. I tried to bless it. But you can't bless what's older than creation. The eye predates God. It watches the watchers. Thomas shook his head. This isn't real. This is a dream. I'm asleep. A child's voice interrupted him. You're not asleep, Mr. Thomas. He turned. A little boy stood behind him, no older than 6. Pale. Naked. Eyes scooped out. Holding a teddy bear sewn shut. He smiled. You're in the veil now. The place between seeing and seen. Everyone who breaks the rule ends up here. Everyone who blinks. Thomas fell to his knees. I didn't mean to. You don't have to mean to, the boy said. It only takes one blink. One sleep. 1 second of surrender. Then, a tremor. The ground, or whatever it was, shivered. Moaned. Something massive shifted beyond the darkness. The damned fell silent. They began to weep. It's coming, Karen whispered. He's looking for someone new. Someone fresh. Thomas turned in place. He saw it. Rising above the void like a god made of smoke, rot, and endless bone. The Faceless One. But not as before. It was no longer confined to humanoid form. It had unfolded. Its body was a spiraling column of ribs and limbs and gnashing mouths, rising into infinity. Dozens of bloodshot, twitching eyes circled its body like tumors. Some human. Some animal. Some, still blinking. And one giant eye pulsed in the center of its chest, red, vertical, unblinking. Thomas. The voice split his mind like lightning. It came from everywhere and nowhere. Inside and out. You looked. You saw. You let me in. And now, you will see for me. The damned began to chant in unison. Soft. Rhythmic. He never blinks. He always sees. He opens the gate. Through eyes like these. Thomas felt something crawl beneath his skin. Inside his skull. Behind his empty sockets. Then. A searing white pain. He screamed as his body convulsed. Hands flew to his face. Something was pushing its way out of him. Not blood. Not bone. But eyes. New ones. Alien ones. Opening where his old ones had been. They weren't his. They were slick, black, and oval. Each blinkless. Glowing faint red. He fell to the ground, shaking. And then, he saw. Not through his eyes. Not through human perception. But through every shadow in the house. Every crack in the wall. Every mirror. Flash. He saw the house, Ashvale Manor, alive. Breathing. Writhing. Filled with new prey. A real estate agent unlocking the door. Two teens filming a ghost hunting video on their phone. A delivery man stepping inside to find a missing package. He saw them. And they blinked. Flash. He saw their screams. Their panic. Their retreat into corners. Only to be caught. To be seen. To be peeled open. He watched them taken. One by one. Into the veil. Into his world. The world where he now belonged. He tried to look away. Tried to close his eyes. But they wouldn't obey. They no longer belonged to him. And neither did his mind. "You're one of us now," the little boy whispered, appearing beside him again. "A seer." "What do you mean?" "You guide others here. Every time someone blinks, every time someone looks too long into a shadow, you see it happen. You watch." Thomas crawled backward, sobbing. "No. No, I won't." Karen's rotted face appeared above him. "You already are." Suddenly, his body jerked. He was back in the house. Lying on the floor. Eyes open. But not his. Everything seemed normal. The hallway. The light. The creaking floorboards. Until he realized. He was watching through the camera feed. From outside his own body. The real Thomas, or what was left of him, stood in the hallway, motionless. Staring at the camera. Eyes wide. Red. Unblinking. A man possessed. A man used. Somewhere outside, someone knocked on the door. Thomas felt it. He watched as his body turned. Smiled. Walked to the door. Opened it. A curious delivery driver peeked inside. "Hello. I've got a..." He blinked. One blink. That's all it took. And in that instant, Thomas saw. From inside the driver's mind. The Faceless One. Rushing. Filling the gaps. Coming. Back in the veil, Thomas screamed as the cycle began again. He tore at his face, sobbing, begging for death. But the damned only watched. And whispered. He never blinks. He always sees. Through you now. So none may leave. And from above, the Faceless One whispered with finality. Your eyes are mine. Your purpose is clear. Watch. 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 Thomas no longer knew where he ended and the Faceless One began. His body remained in the house, a vessel, a puppet, a watcher. But he, the soul of what once was Thomas Merrin, drifted endlessly in the veil, the liminal plane between waking and nightmare, between seeing and being seen. A dimension stitched together with screams, shadows, and eyes, millions of unblinking, open eyes hanging in the dark like stars that had gone mad. Each eye was a window. A doorway. A mirror. And Thomas could see through all of them. He watched people everywhere. People across cities, countries, timelines, blinking. And every blink was a threat. The Faceless One used him now. Used his vision to find new hosts. New victims. New doors. Each time someone blinked near an unlit corner, a darkened hallway, or a flickering TV screen, Thomas was there. Watching. And worse, guiding it. He tried to resist. He screamed within the veil. He clawed at his face, begged to be erased, to be forgotten. But the damned only stared with hollow sockets. Their mouths stitched shut. Their skin stretched taut. Their expressions frozen in the moment they saw too much. Among them stood Karen. She no longer spoke. Her mouth was now stitched with barbed wire. But her eyes, the empty pits where they once were, still followed him everywhere he drifted. As if to say, "You did this." Then something changed. A flicker. A pulse in the blackness. A crack in the veil. Not metaphorical. Literal. It split open like a wound in the sky, revealing something ancient. A door, tall, iron, covered in hundreds of small, blinking eyes. They all blinked in perfect unison. The only blinking allowed here. And beneath it, carved in flesh. The shadow gate. Thomas was pulled toward it like a dead leaf in a current. A force beyond his will. He screamed. The closer he got, the more the eyes on the door opened, revealing faces behind them. Human. Twisted. Screaming in silence. Trapped inside each one. He realized. They were past seers. Others who had served the eye. And been discarded. And now they lived here, inside the door, blinking forever. "You are ready," boomed the Faceless One, its voice folding the veil into static. "You will bring me more." The gate began to open. Inside was pure shadow. But not the kind cast by light. This was thinking shadow. Living. Breathing. A place where God had no name. Thomas was hurled through it. Instantly, the world changed. No longer the dreamlike haze of the veil. This was a realm beneath even that. The eye's domain. A palace of unmaking. Everything was made of flesh and bone and reflection. Hallways that twisted into themselves. Doors that opened into screaming mouths. Stairs that descended infinitely into pits of watching children. The walls whispered prayers to the eye. He sees. He sees. He sees. And all around were seers like Thomas, some new, some centuries old. Eyes covering their bodies. Eyes in their hands. In their mouths. One seer had eyes in place of fingernails, blinking every time he flexed. Another floated, her skin translucent, and inside her organs were tiny red glowing pupils. And they all chanted. The shadow gate is open. The world above must be peeled. The watchers must multiply. Thomas was dragged before a throne. Not made of gold, but of people. Twisted together. Bent backward. Still alive. All eyes gouged out. Except one. At the center of the throne sat the origin of the Faceless One. A massive eye. Large as a cathedral. Surrounded by a spider-like body with 100 limbs. It did not speak. It simply looked at him. And he saw everything. Visions flooded his mind. A woman in her apartment, brushing her teeth, pausing, feeling watched, blinking. A little boy in a forest, staring into the trees, seeing movement, blinking. A priest in confession, opening his eyes after prayer, blinking. A man, filming a horror podcast, joking about cursed houses, blinking. Each time, the eye spread. Each blink, a portal. Each moment of vulnerability, a new infection. Thomas screamed. I won't help you anymore. I won't bring them. But the eye entered him. Not physically, but through his memories. Through his guilt. It showed him Karen, alive. Coming to help him. Begging him to let her in. And he blinked. It showed his parents, the memory of their funeral, the car crash, and the eye whispered, they blinked, too. It showed him himself, hunched at the desk, writing horror stories that mocked fear, until fear found him. You invited me when you wrote about me. You fed me when you imagined me. Now I am real because of you. Thomas collapsed. The palace pulsed with shadows. And then, something new. A heartbeat. Not his. Not the eyes. But something, human. A girl. Somewhere beyond this place. Unseen. Still unblinking. He felt her. A ripple in the eye's vision. Someone fighting back. Someone trying to close their eyes forever. He saw her in flashes. A teenage girl in a hospital bed. Heart monitor screaming. Eyes forced open with medical tape. Doctors panicking. She'd been blinking too much. They thought it was a neurological disorder. But Thomas knew. She was being watched. She had seen the eye. And she was resisting. He turned toward the throne. And for the first time, the eye flinched. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't escape. But maybe, he could redirect the eye. Maybe he could buy someone else time. Even one blink of freedom. He lunged toward the throne, toward the great eye. The seers screamed behind him. The palace warped. He drove his fingers, what was left of them, into his own eye sockets. And screamed. You can't see through me anymore. The eye wailed. A shockwave exploded outward, fracturing the palace. And in the split moment of pain, he focused on her. The girl. The only one resisting. And he gave her the warning. Just one whisper. Carried through the ether. Through the walls. Through the cracks. Don't blink. She heard it. Back in the hospital bed, her eyes widened. She sat up. And began to understand. In the eye's realm, Thomas vanished. His body torn apart by shadow. But he smiled. Because he had made it flinch. The whisper came from nowhere. And everywhere. Don't blink. It slithered between machines, crawled down the fluorescent hallway lights, and curled like smoke around the sleeping girl's ears. Her name was Emily Crow, age 17. She had been in St. Harlow's Hospital for 9 days. Doctors didn't understand her condition. They called it a neurological seizure variant. They said her brain was overreacting to stimuli, forcing her to blink hundreds of times in rapid succession before violently stopping altogether. But it wasn't medical. It wasn't seizures. It was something else. She had seen it. And it had seen her back. It began one night 2 weeks ago, when she was sitting on the floor of her room, crying over her parents' screams downstairs. The light had flickered. Just once. Her tears blurred the room. And when she blinked, she saw it. A tall figure in the hallway mirror. Still. Silent. Watching. It disappeared the moment her eyes reopened. And then it started following her. Everywhere. In the hospital now, she lay strapped to a bed. The doctors didn't understand why she was so terrified to close her eyes. They forced her to sleep. To rest. They made her blink. That's when it started killing the staff. First, the night nurse was found in the locker room, her face peeled back like wrapping paper, eyes gone. Then a security guard was found sitting at his desk, rigid, mouth agape, blood running from his empty sockets. Each victim had one thing in common: security footage showed them blinking moments before they died. Now Emily was being held in isolation, under 24-hour surveillance. They had taped her eyelids shut to keep her from straining. But she was awake. Fully awake. Every second. Waiting. Listening. And when she heard that voice, Thomas's voice, "Don't blink," something inside her clicked. Something ancient. Terrified. A part of the soul no MRI could scan. She began tearing the tape from her eyes with bloodied fingers. Machines beeped. Alarms blared. The nurses ran in. "Emily. Stop." But she was screaming now. "It's coming. It's in the shadows. You can't let it see." They tried to sedate her. They blinked. And that was enough. The lights died. The shadows came alive. And something slid out from under the hospital bed. Tall. Twisted. Crawling. The Faceless One had arrived. The nurses didn't have time to run. Their screams were swallowed by the walls. Blood painted the floors. And Emily, bathed in pulsing red emergency light, stared into the dark. Not blinking. Not once. She knew now what Thomas had meant. She'd seen him in her dreams. A man screaming in blackness. A man with no eyes who could see through everything. A man who sacrificed himself to give her this chance. Now it was up to her. She had to end this. She had to find the core. The source. The eye itself. She climbed out of bed and fled barefoot through the halls. Stepping over broken glass, severed limbs, and the crushed remains of orderlies. Her four-line dragged behind her like a tether to the human world. The further she ran, the darker things became. Not just visually, spiritually. She passed windows that no longer looked outside, but into voids of stars and screaming faces. She passed doors that opened to rooms filled with hanging corpses, each one bearing her face. And always, behind her. That skittering. Like bone on tile. She found a broom closet and slammed the door shut behind her. Sat on the floor. Shivering. Unblinking. She whispered over and over. "Don't blink. Don't blink. Don't blink." Then, a voice answered. But not Thomas. Something older. Something from beyond. "You see me now. You are my mirror. Your eyes are clear, Emily. You will walk the path." And then. A door appeared. Not a real door. A vertical gash in the air, made of teeth and skin, opening slowly with a wet, sucking sound. Beyond it. The veil. She stepped through. Instantly, gravity reversed. Sound inverted. Color bled. She was no longer in the world. She was in the space between. She saw the same black nothingness Thomas had described, the floating eyes, the screaming souls, the dangling seers. But unlike Thomas, she did not fall. She floated. Something welcomed her. The darkness did not reject her. It embraced her. And then, he appeared. The Faceless One, rising from the shifting tar beneath her, unfolding like a monstrous blooming flower. "I am the last eye. The first gaze. I am before the blink. And you, are mine." But Emily didn't look away. She stared straight into the void of its chest, where the great eye opened, red, vertical, alive. It stared back. Searching. But found nothing. Where is your fear? Where is your blink? She smiled, lips trembling. I gave it away. To him. To Thomas. And she closed her eyes. The entire realm screamed. The seers convulsed. The skies cracked. The great eye shuddered, blinking for the first time in eternity. And in that moment, Emily broke the rule. The ultimate defiance. She blinked willingly. Not out of weakness. Not out of fear. But out of choice. The world imploded. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying in her hospital bed. Sunlight streamed through the windows. Birds chirped. Her 4 beeped steadily. No one was dead. No one was missing. The hallway was calm. Everything, reset. Like it never happened. But she remembered. All of it. And on the bedside table sat Thomas's journal. Leather-bound. With a carved eye. Wired shut. And a final page torn free. Written in blood. Emily, you're the only one who didn't blink for the wrong reason. Now you can see what no one else can. Guard the threshold. When others blink, you must watch. She picked up the journal. And heard the whisper again. Hundreds of voices. All around her. The eye sleeps, but not forever. Others will blink. And when they do, open yours. Emily Crow was no longer just a girl. She was a threshold keeper now. A guardian of the fragile veil between light and the thing that watches behind it. The world around her looked normal. Blue skies. Morning birds. Cars humming past her hospital window. But she could see deeper. She saw the eyes' reflections in puddles, in the shadows beneath park benches, in the flicker of a television when no one's watching. It was still there. Dormant, but not dead. The Faceless One had been wounded. Temporarily banished when Emily blinked by choice, rather than out of weakness. But in doing so, she'd become the replacement for Thomas Merrin. She didn't sleep anymore. Didn't blink. Couldn't. Because every time she closed her eyes, she could hear it scratching at the edges of her soul. For weeks after the hospital incident, Emily lived in secrecy. She was released under psychiatric observation, moved to her grandmother's rural home on the edge of Asheville, the cursed town where it all began. She told no one what happened. But she watched. Constantly. And then, it started again. A news headline caught her eye one morning. Terror in Blackridge Mall, eyeless security guard found in surveillance room. The photo was blurry, but Emily recognized the expression. That scream of a soul who saw it just before they died. She felt it deep in her stomach. It's waking up again. She returned to Asheville Manor. The source. The cradle. The place where the eye first opened in this world. The gates were rusted. The windows blackened. Vines had overtaken the brick. But the weight of it, like the pressure of being watched through layers of skin, remained. She stepped through the door. And the veil screamed back into her mind. The house was alive. Rooms changed behind her back. Walls bled shadow. The mirrors whispered. Where is the seer? Where is the boy? The girl has blinked. She found Thomas's journal on the floor, pages torn apart and rearranged. It now pulsed with warmth, like a beating heart. A new page had appeared since she last read it. A map. Not of the house, but of the inner realm. The source. A labyrinth of reflection and rot. And at the end? A sigil drawn in blood. The last blink. Emily understood what she had to do. There would be no rest. No safety. Not until the eye was sealed. Not just delayed, but erased. She descended into the basement. Deeper than the foundation. Into the soil. The bones of Ashvale. Past forgotten rooms, rotted stairwells, and murals scratched into stone depicting hundreds of blindfolded humans feeding something beneath the earth. It was a temple. Built not by man, but by the seers before her. The ones who served, then rebelled. And in the center of this ancient tomb was a mirror. 7 feet tall. Cracked. Oozing. Alive. It showed her not her reflection. But Thomas. He stood inside the mirror. His eyes gone. But his voice steady. You're the last one, Emily. The eye grows with every blink. With every scream. With every weak mind that dares to look into the dark without armor. But you're different. You saw the eye, and didn't flinch. Now you must do what I couldn't. He pointed behind her. She turned. And saw it. The Faceless One, reborn. Larger. Grander. More furious. Its body composed of every soul it had ever devoured, stitched together with strands of blood and darkness. Its eyes, thousands of them now, rolled in chaotic rhythm across its torso, legs, even fingers. And one word echoed through the cavern as it crawled toward her. Blink. The shadows crashed into her, forming hands that clawed at her face, her eyes, her soul. Her mind buckled under the pressure. Every instinct screamed to close her eyes. To escape the sight of it. But she knew the rule. She screamed. I see you. And in that scream, the mirror cracked further, revealing the core. The origin point of the eye. A swirling mass of consciousness that never blinked. That could never sleep. That was cursed to see all things forever. Emily had one choice. The journal in her hand began to disintegrate, the ink bleeding from the pages like tears. Inside was the final instruction, written by Thomas in his final moment. To end it, you must do what it cannot. You must blink. And never open your eyes again. She stepped forward. The eye shrieked. The Faceless One convulsed. Reality shattered like glass around them. You will not erase me, it howled. I am the watcher behind the veil. I am older than God. I am blind, she whispered. And she closed her eyes. The entire chamber screamed. Light poured out of her sockets. The eye thrashed, disintegrating, howling as if for the first time in all existence it had tasted darkness. It couldn't see her anymore. It couldn't find anything. And in that darkness, it died. The temple imploded. The shadows folded. The screaming stopped. The blinking ceased. Emily's body was found weeks later, resting in the temple below Ashvale, untouched, eyes closed. Peaceful. Smiling. She never opened her eyes again. And the eye? Gone. Forever. Or so they thought. 6 months later. A boy sat in a dark bedroom. Rain tapped softly on his window. He turned off his flashlight, tucked the horror book he'd been reading under his pillow, and yawned. Then, he blinked. And in the reflection of his black TV screen, something blinked back. The end.